They all watched the cowboy take her hand. So why did she turn and walk straight past him? The fiddle cuts sharp through the cold night air, boots thudding against the wooden floor as the circle opens. Rhett's hand hangs there, steady, waiting. Lantern light flickers across faces. Then she moves, not toward him. Her skirt brushes past shoulders, the sound of her steps swallowed by the music as she stops in front of the one man standing in the dark, his hat clenched tight enough to bend. And he still doesn't reach for her. Not yet. Watch closely. This is where it starts to matter. Dry Ridge, Montana, 1888, ran on dust and stories. By mid-morning, the street outside the saloon filled with both. Horses tied along the rail, boots on the boardwalk, voices carrying far enough to make a stranger think something important was always happening. And most days, it was the same kind of important. Cowboys riding in. That morning, it was Rhett Maddox. You heard him before you saw him. Laughter rolling ahead of his horse like a warm wind. Someone clapped him on the shoulder before he even swung down from the saddle. Another man reached for his hand, grinning like they had a private joke no one else would ever hear. Rhett, you made it back in one piece. Hadn't planned on doing otherwise, Rhett said, easy as breathing. Dust on his coat, sun on his face. The kind of man who never had to ask for a place. There was always one waiting. Across the street, the hammer struck iron. Once, twice, steady. It didn't stop for the laughter. Inside the open front forge, heat clung low and heavy. The air smelled of coal and metal and something sharp enough to stay in your throat. Jonah Pike stood at the anvil, sleeves rolled, shoulders set. His shirt was already dark with sweat, though the sun had barely climbed. He lifted the hammer again. The blow landed clean. Sparks jumped, brief and bright, then died on the packed dirt floor. "Hey, Smith!" someone called from the street without turning his head. "Got my mare ready yet?" Jonah didn't look up. "She's by the rail. Shoes'll hold." The man gave a half wave, already walking off. No name. No pause. Just another thing done. Jonah turned the iron, checked the line of the bend with his thumb, then set it back into the fire. The bellows wheezed as he pulled the handle, the flame answering like it always did, faithful, hungry, loud. Outside, Rhett's laughter rose again. Inside, the hammer kept time. Elena Ward stepped off the stagecoach just before noon. She didn't hurry, didn't look lost either. Just stood there with one gloved hand resting on her small valise, taking in Dry Ridge like she meant to remember it exactly as it was. The wind caught the hem of her dress. Dust lifted, then settled again. She watched the street, watched the men gathered around Rhett, the easy way they leaned toward him, the way space opened without asking. Someone handed him a drink before he reached the door. Someone else told a story that ended with his name. It was all very clear. Someone near her said, not unkindly, "You'll see. That's how it is here. Cowboys run this place." Elena didn't answer. Her gaze moved, past the horses, past the saloon door, across the street where the sound of iron carried, steady as a heartbeat you only noticed if you stopped listening for everything else. The forge stood open to the day. Heat shimmered at the threshold. Inside, Jonah Pike lifted the hammer again. He didn't look up when she stepped closer to the edge of the boardwalk. Didn't seem to notice anything beyond the iron in his hands and the line it needed to follow. The blow landed. Precise. Certain. Not loud enough to compete with the laughter. But it didn't need to be. Elena watched him longer than she meant to. Not the work alone. The way he moved through it. No wasted motion. No show in it. Just the next thing. Done right because it needed doing. He turned the piece, checked it once, then set it aside. Only then did he glance toward the street. His eyes passed over the crowd, over Rhett, over the horses. They didn't stop on anything, just took it in and let it go again. For a moment, they brushed past Elena, not long enough to be called a look. Then he turned back to the fire. Elena shifted her grip on the valise, looked away first. Someone beside her said, "You settling in, ma'am?" "Yes," she said after a beat. "I believe I am." She stepped down from the boardwalk and followed the road toward the schoolhouse at the far end of town. Behind her, Rhett's voice carried, easy and bright. Across the street, the hammer struck again. The sound followed her halfway down the road before it blended into everything else Dry Ridge had to offer. Most people forgot it as soon as they turned the corner. Elena didn't. She walked on, not looking back. But the rhythm stayed with her. One beat longer than it should have. Then she tucked it away like it hadn't meant anything at all. The schoolhouse sat at the far end of Dry Ridge, where the road thinned and the noise gave up trying. It was a one-room building with a narrow porch and a bell that rang a little sharp if you pulled it too hard. Elena learned that on her second morning. She rang it softer after that. The children came in boots dusted white, coats half-buttoned, hands still cold from the walk. She set books on the front table, straightened slates, wrote the day's date in careful chalk across the board. November 3rd, 1888. By noon, the wind had picked up. It pushed at the window frame, rattled the loose hinge on the south side with a steady complaint that carried through her lesson on long division. She paused once, looked at it, then went on. After the children left, she stayed a while longer, stacked the books, folded the map back into its case. She touched the hinge once with her fingers, felt it give more than it should. It would not hold through winter. By late afternoon, the light had softened, the kind of pale gold that made the dust look almost gentle. Elena wrapped her shawl tighter, lifted the lantern from the corner table, and stepped out onto the road. She didn't hurry. The forge was still open. It usually was. Jonah Pike stood where he had been that morning, or close enough to it. The fire had settled lower now, the heat less sharp but still there. He was working a thinner piece of iron this time, shaping it slow, checking the curve with the edge of his thumb. Elena stopped just outside the threshold. Everyone stopped there first. He finished the stroke before looking up. "Miss Ward," he said. It wasn't a question, just a statement placed where it belonged. She held up the lantern. "The hinge won't hold." He stepped forward, took it from her hands without touching her fingers, turned it once, then again. His eyes moved over the metal the way a careful man reads something that might matter later. "The hinge is bent," she said. "It is," he agreed. "But that's not what's causing it." She watched him tilt the lantern toward the light. His thumb pressed against the base where it met the frame. "This fitting's loose," he said. "Fix the hinge, it'll give again in a month." No judgment in it, just the shape of the problem. "How long?" she asked. "Come back Thursday." She nodded, didn't ask the price. On Thursday, she came back. The lantern sat on the bench, already finished. Not just the hinge. The base held firm now, tightened clean. A hairline crack along the side had been filled so neatly she had to look twice to find where it had been. "You fixed the crack," she said. "It was there," he answered. "Would have let water in." She set coins on the table, fewer than she expected. He didn't look at them. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once. She turned to leave, then paused at the door, as if remembering something she had meant to ask. She didn't ask it. Instead, she stepped out into the cooling air and walked back the way she had come. The next Tuesday, she returned with a desk hinge from the schoolroom. The Tuesday after that, a window latch. Each time, the same rhythm. She arrived. He worked. The piece was better when she picked it up than when she had set it down, and there was always something he fixed that she hadn't noticed. By the third week, she brought nothing. She stood at the doorway a moment longer than usual, then stepped inside. "I was wondering," she said, not quite looking at him, "if I might watch you work. I'm putting together a lesson for the older students." Jonah didn't stop moving. The hammer rose, fell. He set the iron back into the fire, pulled the bellows once. "You can sit," he said. There was a wooden crate near the wall. She took it. From there, she could see everything. The tools lined in their places. The worn handle of the hammer, smooth from years of grip. The way he wiped his hands on a cloth before touching anything that wasn't iron. He didn't speak unless she asked something. Even then, his answers were short, enough to be understood. No more. She stayed an hour, then came back the next week. Old Man Briggs noticed first. He was standing in the doorway of his general store, ledger tucked under one arm, when she passed by for the third Tuesday in a row. Same hour, same direction. "School's that way," he called after her, not unkindly. She didn't slow. "I know." He watched her go, then looked across the street at the forge. The hammer rang once, then again. He said to no one in particular, and went back inside. That same afternoon, Rhett Maddox rode up to the schoolhouse with a bundle of flowers tied with twine. They were good flowers, brought in from the next town over, not the kind you picked from the roadside. He knocked once, then leaned against the frame like he had all the time in the world. Elena opened the door. "Afternoon," he said, tipping his hat just enough. "Mr. Maddox?" "Rhett'll do." He held out the flowers. She took them after a second, careful with the stems. "They're lovely," she said. "Figured you might like a bit of color in that room." She glanced past him toward the road, then back again. "Thank you." He smiled, easy as ever. "There's a social coming up, end of the month. Thought you might want to see how Dry Ridge celebrates." "I might," she said. It was not a yes, not a no either. He seemed satisfied with that. "Evening then," he said, and stepped back into the light. As he rode off, laughter followed him again, picked up by the wind and carried down the street. Elena set the flowers in a jar of water on the windowsill. That evening, she walked past the forge on her way back to the boarding house. She did not stop. Inside, Jonah was alone. The fire low, the light thinner now. He was bent over the workbench, shoulders drawn in close. For a moment, she slowed. He lifted something small from the table, turned it in his hands. The shape caught the light just enough for her to see it. A small horseshoe, no bigger than her palm, edges smoothed, a line etched along one side. Not for a horse, for someone else. He heard something at the door. Not her, just the shift of air. The piece disappeared beneath a cloth before she could make sense of it. She kept walking, didn't look back. But the image stayed. Small, careful, made before anyone asked for it, like it had always been meant for someone. She reached the boarding house as the sky went dark. Upstairs, she set her gloves on the dresser, untied her hair, and stood by the window a moment longer than she needed to. Across town, the forge fire burned low. No one was there to see it, except, perhaps, someone who had already learned how to notice. December came in with a hard wind that rattled every loose board in Dry Ridge. It slipped under doors, found its way through coat seams, and made a man pull his hat lower even when the sun was out. At the forge, the second stool was gone. Elena noticed it the first Tuesday she walked in and found only the crate against the wall. Jonah didn't look up when she stepped inside. The hammer fell faster than it had before. Not careless, just quicker, like there was less time for anything that wasn't iron. "I brought the latch," she said, holding it out. He took it, eyes on the metal, not on her. It'll be ready Thursday. No more than that. She stayed a moment longer than she needed to. The fire cracked. The bellows sighed once. He did not ask her to sit. She left. Outside, the street carried its usual sound. Boots on wood, a wagon rolling slow past Briggs's store. And further down, Rhett Maddox leaned against the hitching rail, talking with Sheriff Cole Mercer. The sheriff saw her first. "Miss Ward," he called, tipping his hat in a way that carried more weight than most. "You coming to the winter social?" She paused. "I haven't decided." Rhett smiled like that answer suited him just fine. "You'll want to. Whole town turns out. Music, dancing. Might even be worth the cold." The sheriff gave a small nod. "A lady like you shouldn't spend a night like that alone." It wasn't pressure. Not in the way a threat is pressure. It was something steadier. Expectation. Elena inclined her head once, then moved on. That afternoon, she walked the longer road back to the boarding house, the one that passed the schoolhouse first, then circled toward the ridge before cutting back into town. She did not pass the forge again that day. Inside, Jonah set the latch aside and reached for the next piece without pause. The work lined up ahead of him like it always did. Horses waiting. Hinges stacked. A gate repair marked in chalk on the wall. He picked up the hammer. It slipped once. Not much. Just enough to make him stop and reset his grip. The next blow landed clean. By the time the day turned, the wind had sharpened. It carried talk from one end of town to the other without asking permission. "Rhett's taking Miss Ward to the social. He hasn't asked yet. He will." Jonah heard it all without looking up. On the third evening, she said it out loud. He was fitting a shoe when she stepped into the doorway, the cold following her in. "You're avoiding me." The hammer paused in the air, then came down. "I've got work," he said. "You've always had work." Another strike. The iron turned, the line checked. She stepped closer, not into the heat, just near enough that he would have to look at her if he chose to. He didn't. "Jonah?" Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. He set the shoe back into the fire and pulled the bellows once. The flame answered. "You should go to that social," he said. It landed between them like something already decided. She watched his hands, the way they stayed steady even when the rest of him didn't quite match. "I haven't said I would." "You should," he repeated. The hammer came down again, harder this time. She stood there a moment longer, long enough for the fire to shift and settle, long enough for him to finish the piece in front of him. Then she turned and left. The day of the social came clear and cold. Snow threatened but never fell, leaving the ground hard underfoot and the sky sharp as glass. Lanterns were strung across the open space by the church hall. Music carried through the air, fiddle and guitar finding their way between laughter and boots on packed earth. Rhett Maddox stood near the center of it all, clean shirt, coat brushed down, hat set just so. He saw Elena the moment she stepped into the light. He crossed to her without hurry. "Evening," he said. "Evening." He offered his arm. She didn't take it, but she didn't step away either. "Dance?" he asked, extending his hand when the music turned. Around them, heads turned. Conversations slowed, not stopped, just shifted. Elena looked at his hand, then past him. At the far edge of the lantern light, Jonah Pike stood with his hat in both hands, cleaned up as much as a man like him ever was. The soot gone, but the mark of it still there, set deep into the lines of his skin. He should not have been there. Everyone knew that. He knew it too. His eyes met hers for a moment, then dropped. Rhett's hand waited. Elena stepped forward. Not toward Rhett. She moved past him, through the space that opened without anyone meaning it to. Boots quiet on the packed ground, lantern light catching the edge of her coat as she went. She stopped in front of Jonah, close enough that he had to look up. "Dance with me," she said. He stared at her, then past her, as if the answer might be written somewhere else. "Miss Ward." "Elena." He tightened his grip on the hat brim. "Clara," he started, then stopped himself, breath catching just enough to show. She held his gaze. "My name is Elena," she said, softer now, "and I'm asking you." The music didn't stop, but something else did. He set his hat down on the rail beside him. "I'm not," he began. She didn't let him finish. "If I ever choose," she said, her voice steady enough to carry, "it won't be the one everyone's watching." The words settled over the crowd without needing to be louder. No one moved. Rhett stood where she had left him, his hand still half raised, then lowering slowly at his side. Jonah looked at her. Really looked this time. Then he reached out. His hand hovered for the briefest second before taking hers. They stepped into the edge of the dance, not the center, not where the light was strongest. He counted under his breath. Quiet. Careful. Like everything else he did. She followed without correcting him. Around them, the music picked up again. Voices returned, but not the same as before. Something had shifted, not loudly, but enough that no one missed it. The next morning came cold and quiet. Frost clung to the hitching rail outside the forge, thin as glass. The street had not yet found its voice. No laughter, no music. Just the slow creak of a wagon somewhere far off, and the soft hiss of wind moving through the gaps between buildings. Jonah was already working. He had been since before sunrise. The hammer fell, steady, measured, no faster than before, no slower. But something in the space around it had changed. The stool by the wall did not return. He did not look toward the door. Elena passed by just after 8, a book tucked under her arm, gloves pulled tight. She did not slow. Inside, the hammer paused once, then resumed. By noon, the town had settled back into itself, though not quite the same as before. People spoke lower when they passed the forge, not out of respect. Not exactly. More like they were still deciding what they had seen the night before. At Briggs's store, 2 men leaned against the counter. "Did you see it?" one asked. "Hard to miss." "You think it means something?" Briggs closed his ledger with a soft thump. "Everything means something," he said, not looking up. That afternoon, Rhett Maddox rode past the forge without stopping. He tipped his hat once. Jonah did not see it, or pretended not to. Elena did not come on Tuesday, nor the Tuesday after that. The days stretched thin and even. Work lined up. Work got done. The forge burned. The town carried on. Snow threatened twice. Never came. 3 days before Christmas, the rain did. It started before dawn. A steady fall that turned the road to mud and filled the creek north of town until it ran louder than usual. By morning, the boards on the north bridge had gone dark with water, the supports swelling under the weight. By midday, it gave way. Not all at once. One side first, a sharp crack that carried across the ridge, then the sag, slow and certain. A wagon had just started across. Old Pete Dawson was driving. The horse spooked at the sound, pulled hard to the left. The wheel caught against a broken beam and locked there. Water rushed beneath. Men came running. Rhett was first. He rode straight into the creek, boots still in the stirrups, voice sharp and clear as he tried to steady the horse. "Easy now, easy!" The animal fought him, eyes wide, hooves slipping against wet wood. "Get a rope," someone shouted. They brought one. Rhett looped it, tried to pull the horse free from the angle it was caught in. It didn't move. The wagon creaked. The beam held just enough to make it worse. At the edge of the crowd, Elena stood with her coat pulled close. Rain had soaked through her sleeves. She didn't seem to notice. Her eyes stayed on the bridge. Jonah arrived without a horse. He came from the lower road, a length of chain over one shoulder, a pry bar in his hand. He didn't call out, didn't ask what had happened. He looked once. That was enough. Rhett was still working the rope, still trying to pull the horse back the way it had come. Jonah stepped into the water. Cold took him first, then the current. He moved past the horse, past the men calling instructions, down to where the wheel was caught. He crouched, water up to his chest now, and ran his hand along the beam. Found the angle. Set the pry bar. "Hold him steady," he said, not raising his voice. Rhett shifted his grip, tightened the rope. The horse stilled just enough. Jonah leaned his weight into the bar. The iron bit through his gloves. The wood groaned. It didn't move. He reset. Lower this time. Closer to the joint where the beam had split. Pushed again. The current pressed against him, dragging at his legs. He held. The beam lifted. Just enough. "Now," he said. The wheel slipped free with a sharp crack. The horse lunged forward, scrambling up the bank with the rope still in Rhett's hands. The wagon followed, pulled by 3 men at once, inch by inch, until it cleared the broken edge. The noise came back all at once. Voices, boots, the rush of movement as men stepped in to help Pete down from the seat. Jonah stayed where he was for a second longer. Then he let go of the bar. The water closed over it. He waded back to shore. No one stopped him. No one spoke. He climbed up onto the bank, water dripping from his coat, his sleeves dark to the elbow. He pulled off one glove, then the other. His hands were red where the iron had pressed through. He looked at them once, like he was checking a tool. That was all. Elena moved then. She stepped through the space the others left without meaning to leave it. Stopped in front of him. Did not ask. Just took his hand. Careful. Like it mattered. He didn't pull away. Didn't look at her either. The rain eased. Behind them the wagon was righted. The horse calmed. Pete Dawson sat on a crate, wrapped in someone's coat, talking louder than he needed to, as if the sound of his own voice might steady things. But no one was looking there. Not really. They were looking at the man who had gone into the water and come back out with nothing to say about it. Elena held his hand a moment longer, then let go. He nodded once and walked back toward the forge. The town didn't follow him, not right away. They stayed by the broken bridge, voices low now, hands busy with what still needed doing. A rope tied, a wheel checked. Someone leading the horse away, slower this time. But their eyes lingered, just a moment longer than before. By morning, the story had settled into Dry Ridge the way dust always did. Quiet, everywhere. No one needed to say it out loud. It showed in the way men stepped aside when Jonah passed, in the way Briggs closed his ledger halfway through a line just to watch him walk by. Jonah didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't carry it. He stood at the forge, sleeves rolled, hands wrapped in clean cloth where the burns had marked him. The hammer rested on the anvil, not lifted, not yet. He looked at his hands, not like tools this time, like something he hadn't fully understood. The fire had burned low overnight. He reached for the bellows, then stopped, left it where it was. For the first time in a long while there was nothing urgent waiting. Across town, the school bell rang once, then again. Elena opened the door to the schoolhouse and stood there a moment before stepping back inside. The room held its usual quiet. Desks in their places. Chalk laid neat along the board. A cup of coffee sat on the front table, untouched, steam thinning into the air. She had placed it there without thinking. The children arrived. Lessons began. Pages turned. Numbers spoken out loud, then corrected. The day moved the way days always did, but she glanced at the door once, then again. In the afternoon, the light shifted toward evening, the kind that stretched shadows across the floor and made the room feel larger than it was. A knock came, soft, not uncertain, just careful. She crossed the room and opened the door. Jonah stood there, hat in his hands, coat dry now, the cloth around his palms clean, but still there. He didn't step inside until she moved aside. The schoolroom smelled faintly of chalk and coffee. He looked around once, took in the desks, the board, the small stack of books near the window. "I've never been in here," he said. "I know." He nodded, as if that made sense. They stood a moment without speaking, the kind of silence that doesn't ask to be filled. Then he set his hat on the nearest desk. "I've been thinking," he said. She waited. "About what I can offer?" He paused, not searching for words, just placing them right. "About what I thought that meant." She leaned back against the table. The coffee sat between them, forgotten for now. "I figured you deserved better," he went on. "Something easier, something lighter." A small breath left him, not quite a laugh. "So I decided for you." He looked down at his hands, then back up again. "That wasn't my decision to make." Elena didn't move, didn't answer. He stepped closer, not enough to crowd the space, just enough that the distance between them meant something. "I fix things," he said. "That's what I do. I look at what's broken, and I find the part that matters, the part that holds everything else together." His voice stayed even, but there was something underneath it now, something he wasn't setting aside this time. "I missed one," he said. She tilted her head slightly. "Which one?" He met her eyes. "Myself." The room held that for a second, maybe two. Then she reached past him, lifted the cup of coffee from the table, and placed it in his hand. It was still warm. "I make this every morning," she said. "Same time, same cup." He looked at it, then at her. "I know." She didn't smile, didn't need to. He set the cup down carefully on the desk, like it belonged there. "I'm not asking you to stay," he said. "I already did that," she answered. Simple, clear. He nodded once. Then he stepped forward and kissed her. Not quick, not uncertain, just steady, like the way he worked, like he had finally stopped checking whether it was allowed. She didn't pull back. Outside, the wind moved along the ridge. The town went on with itself. A wagon rolled past. Someone called out across the street. Life didn't pause. Inside, something settled. When they stepped apart, he didn't reach for his hat right away. She didn't move away. The light through the window caught the edge of the chalkboard, the grain of the desks, the quiet between them. "You coming by the forge tomorrow?" he asked. She picked up the empty cup. "I don't need a reason anymore." The next morning, the second stool was back, set where it had always been. A cup of coffee sat on the bench at 7. Jonah worked. The hammer found its rhythm again. Not louder, not softer, just right. Elena sat with her book open, not always reading. Outside, Dry Ridge carried on. Cowboys rode through. Laughter rose and fell, But across the street, in the glow of the forge, something had found its place. Not in the center, not where everyone was watching, but where it mattered. And that was enough. Now imagine standing there yourself, in a town that already decided who matters and who doesn't. Imagine watching everyone cheer for the man in the spotlight, while the one who keeps things standing works in the heat, unseen. And then one day, someone looks past all that and sees you anyway. Not for what you could become, not for what others expect, but for what you've been all along. Maybe that's what this story leaves behind. That sometimes love isn't loud. It doesn't ride in with dust and stories. Sometimes it waits. It notices. It stays long enough for a person to believe something about themselves they've been too careful to hold. And maybe, if you've ever stepped back when you should have stepped forward, you know how hard that moment can be. So tell me, have you ever walked away from something because you thought you weren't enough? There are more stories like this waiting just down the road. Stories about quiet strength, second chances, and the kind of love that doesn't ask for attention, only truth. If this one stayed with you, you're always welcome to ride along for the next.